Simon, you came to Hong Kong from England, right? And Jessica, you used to work in London as well. So what attracted the two of you to the Hong Kong startup ecosystem?
Well, I've been in Hong Kong 18 years,
right.
And I came here really initially just to see what Hong Kong was all about. And like many people, I completely fell in love with the city. And then when I realized just how easy it was to do business here, I decided to set up a company. So one of the first companies I established in Hong Kong is an agency business called Fluid, which was recently ranked as one of the best creative agencies in Hong Kong. I'm very proud of that company. And then from that, I met a lot of talented entrepreneurs, both local entrepreneurs as well as overseas entrepreneurs that wanted help with their startup ideas. And so I started angel investing in these businesses, really, I guess back then, part-time. And then 5 years ago, I decided to make it my full-time job to invest in these ideas and invest in these people and help them truly, get into the trenches with them and support them, build a team to help them. So that's why I established Nest.
Right.
And then I think one of the things I noticed was a lot of people it's kind of this Henry Ford saying, which is basically, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you'll be right.
Yep.
And what I discovered was a lot of people that wanted help in startups would openly say, well, I'm not going to do it in Hong Kong because no one here believes in startups, so I'm going to leave and go to London, or I'm going to leave and go to Silicon Valley. And we were losing Hong Kong talent. So this was what we term at Nest as quiet brain drain. So it's kind of the fulfillment of, well, there's no entrepreneurs here, so let's not build a system to support entrepreneurs. Because there's no system to support those entrepreneurs, they then leave and go to cities that are offering support for these people. So at Nest, we feel like we are fighting hard for Hong Kong to stop this quiet brain drain, because what we're saying to people is you don't need to leave Hong Kong to get help as an entrepreneur now. You can stay here and you will get help. You will get help for entrepreneurs with money and time to help you do just that. And Jess is a good example to me of the potential of quiet brain drain that we experience. So November, the year before last now, right? So you've been with us for over a year, right? Jess was educated born in Hong Kong, educated in London, and then came back to Hong Kong just for 1 month to visit her parents before going back to London to work in the startup scene. And she came for 1 month as an intern with us, and we saw Jess as a symbol of what we're trying to achieve at Nest, which is keep talent here, help brands start here and go global. And then listening to her story, she felt initially that Hong Kong didn't have a good startup scene, and therefore the only place she was going to get what she wanted, which was to be in part of this fast-moving innovation world, was moved back to London. So we managed to convince her to stay in Hong Kong. We think she's a symbol of stopping the quiet brain drain and losing Hong Kong talent, and she's now here in Hong Kong with us. And Jess, maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yes, I was in the London startup scene, and it's what Simon describes as really fast-paced and energetic, and I at first wasn't sure that even existed out here in Hong Kong. But once you sort of do a deep dive into what's going on here, you can see that there are loads of individuals and organizations pushing the startup scene and actually really encouraging it amongst young people as well. So I think even from when I joined, we would see applications from Pitch Day from people who are sort of older professionals or experienced professionals who are leaving their industries and trying to start their own businesses. But in the past 6 months, definitely seeing so many more young people from universities or even younger sometimes starting with their ideas. They're perhaps the quality or the quantity of ideas that they have, they switch every 2 weeks or something, but at least it's there and they're seeing the potential in Hong Kong as well. So that's really driving me to stay here, because something's definitely happening and it's exciting to be pioneering something.
So having experienced both London and Hong Kong, I mean, how does Hong Kong's startup scene look in a comparative perspective? I mean, what are Hong Kong's sort of advantages and disadvantages comparing to places like London or Silicon Valley or whatever it might be?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to say ideas can come from anywhere in the world now.
Of course.
This concept of a geographical restriction is an old concept. With the internet, open cloud, systems to build stuff now, and communications being so easy, you don't need borders. You don't need to think about borders. This is something we try to educate people. It's not about where you are, it's about what you do. But Hong Kong does have some competitive advantages. 5 years ago, when we started Nest, we actually looked at where we could do this anywhere in the world. And actually, places like Singapore, for example, would pay us to go there.
Yep.
So we looked at all the markets. We looked at Silicon Valley, who wouldn't want to live there. We looked at London, we looked at Singapore, we looked at Israel, we looked at Beijing. We came full circle back to Hong Kong and realised that Hong Kong has some very, very distinct competitive advantages. So for example, in this market, we have this one country, two systems process, which really, truly creates an East meets West culture.
Yeah.
Then you have things like transparent banking system here. Yet you have the Chinese banks and the Western banks sitting side by side in the same market. That first of all creates an incredible talent pool of brain power around that particular issue, fintech, for example. But it also allows you to connect with Chinese banks and their problems, as well as Western banks and their problems. And that is a real advantage in, say, for example, fintech. And you look at markets and sectors like wearable tech. If you go to Silicon Valley, as I have done, and you look at wearable tech, for example, they find it very hard to do what we call the lean startup model, which is reiterate the product really quickly. So you have an idea, you give it to a customer, you get feedback, you go back and change it, which is fine in Silicon Valley around apps. But when you started to get into what is now becoming quite a hot subject like wearable tech, especially the B2B wearable tech, less the B2C, less the Fitbit stuff, but much more the B2B side, you need to reiterate the product quickly. And in Hong Kong, people have been manufacturing in China and shipping all over the world in real time and speed for a very long time. So a lot of brain power in that space here in Hong Kong. So manufacturing in Shenzhen, logistically IP management and R&D here, and logistically shipping all around the world. This is why I think Hong Kong has a competitive advantage around wearable tech. And then finally, I do think around healthcare and that sector, Hong Kong has another distinct advantage. Why? In Silicon Valley, they're not necessarily aware of the problems that India and China are experiencing around lack of hospitals, for example, or lack of well-trained doctors, or a lack of middle-class support infrastructure around healthcare, or the aging population. We call it the 1+6 in China, where one person, one child is looking after parents and two sets of grandparents. This is a problem that is completely unique to the 1.3 billion people in China. This is not necessarily a problem the US is even thinking about. So again, Hong Kong is able to tap into that East meets West culture, the global financial system, to fund ideas that are solving problems where half the world's population live, which is in China and India. And these are not problems that even on the radar in places like Silicon Valley. So a real opportunity for Hong Kong, but we have to work hard.
So Simon, you've mentioned how Hong Kong's status under the one country system gives it a lot of distinctive advantages, but recently, not just with the Occupy Central, but with the sort of the general the mood and the sort of belief among young people in Hong Kong, and probably Jessica, you might be sort of more into that, is that there's a lack of opportunity or the lack of social mobility, especially for middle and lower class youth in Hong Kong. So are you worried that these socio-economic challenges will affect the health of Hong Kong's startup ecosystem in the future?
So it's something you're talking about. You're asking a question here that's, I think, very sensitive to us as a company.
Right.
Okay, so here's the crux of it. If you look at Occupy Central, one part of that problem in our view is that young people want to have hope. So if they're going to work in an institution, they're going to get an average salary and they'll never even be able to afford their own flat. If you look at the numbers, next 30, 40 years, it's just present valuations, it's impossible. So what's the hope, right? So this is why we think we're hope. In part, what we're trying to pioneer in Hong Kong. You can basically go out and build a business, work hard, and become Jack Ma, the wealthiest man in China. And then you not can only just buy a little house for yourself, you can buy the peak. And this is what we're saying to people. We're saying you don't need to come from money. You don't need to be connected. We'll provide the money, we'll provide the connections. You just need to be willing to work hard, which is something from the day I arrived in Hong Kong, I noticed as a characteristic by the people here. They work hard and they are willing to put the back into something. You leave at 6 o'clock in Hong Kong, that's a half day, right? I mean, people here work hard, and that's all you need. And I think, when I look at Occupy Central, I think this what we're building at Nest and what this ecosystem is beginning to provide is a new economic pillar for Hong Kong that gives the youth hope. They don't need to move to London or Silicon Valley to have a dream and get it powered up and make it happen. They can make it happen in their city. And I think that's why it's very dear to us. Jess, maybe you have a view on a different angle.
I think I agree with you. I think you're selling the fact that they want to have a voice, they want to have an influence, and what better way than to work for yourself? It's the same sort of vein of thought that I think we're promoting as well.
And this is what Hong Kong was built on.
Yep.
Maybe people have forgotten it, and maybe Hong Kong, we have got a little lazy with the property market going up and the service industry being so strong. But I think Hong Kong has an advantage because it's got no natural resources.
Yep.
It's only built on the back of an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yep.
Right? And I also think it's small market size. It's 7 million people. Silicon Valley has 7 million people.
Yeah.
The wonderful thing with a multicultural system here, I mean, most of the startups we've invested in have many different nationalities working together.
Yep.
So you have to think global from day one.
Yep.
Whereas even in Silicon Valley, they tend to think about the US only.
Yep.
Look at Facebook; it's not even in China.
Yeah.
What's it losing not being in China? $20 billion. But businesses starting here from now onwards can be global from day one, and must be, because the domestic market's too small to rely on. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Now, I know, Simon, I know that you've been sort of very, very vocal about sort of, encouraging young people to not fix their eyes on a good salary with one of the sort of big old institutions, but rather, take the initiative to turn their ideas into, potentially great businesses. So how does Nest reach out to young people and, compete for young talent with, say, Goldman Sachs or McKinsey or, whatever it may be?
Well, you're a young person. Why don't you tell the audience how we compete with Goldman Sachs to keep you?
That's funny.
Thanks.
Well, I think first of all, a lot of young people do approach us because of the brand value that we've built up over the 5 years. Is that there aren't that many companies who are young and agile and quick to move, and you can see it on the way we present ourselves, the way you see us presented on social media or in traditional media as well.
Yep.
So people do actually take notice and say, I want to work for something with that sort of energy and that drive and passion. It's quite transparent as a company, I think. Right. And so people do reach out to us, and that's actually how I found Nest. I Googled startups in Hong Kong, looked through all the companies, and was like, well, Nest seems like fun. And that's how you kind of sway someone to not apply for 10,000 jobs that will be in Central and you wear a suit to work every day and it's boring.
Yep.
Instead, you see things that they've been up to and things that you think they can offer.
Right.
So I think it's very much people who are already looking in that space will find companies that suit them. But it's also about the culture around it and the brand that they've built up.
Right.
I think the important thing to add to what Jess is saying is we're not actually competing with Goldman Sachs. That's not our mission. What we're trying to do is empower people to be in control of their own destiny.
Right.
So that's something that Goldman Sachs, which I think, by the way, in some respects is a great company helping many people develop their careers. So that's for some people, but for most of the people that we attract, they feel like if they go into Goldman Sachs or any institution, it's somewhat like the Matrix, right? The movie The Matrix, which is they're stuck in a system. They can do it, they'll do the job, they can pay their student loans off, they can have an income, and if they work really hard for 38 years, they may have a small flat in Hong Kong. But actually what we want to give people is that unlimited upside. The ability to enjoy what they do every day because they're doing what they are meant to do. So we're not offering a job and here's the role, you must turn up at this time and you can go home at that time. Some people want that. Some people want to be a robot. But the people we're attracting want to be in control of their own lives.
Right.
And all we're doing is we're empowering them to do that.
Giving them
because sometimes people would say, I can't do what I love because I haven't got any money. Or I can't do what I love because I don't have a network, or I don't have relationships, or I don't have experience. And we're saying that all you need is passion, and we'll help you with everything else.
Right.
So this is not a pitch against Goldman Sachs. This is a completely different value proposition.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Simon and Jessica, for being with me.
Thank you for
your
listening to
insight.
your views.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.